Welcome to Life in Red.
Shout out to a mutual friend here and longtime friend who gave me the name Big Red, Alex Como, for kind of, not really putting me in touch, but making me familiar with my guest, Brandon here's story, and very unique story, I would say. So Brandon, thank you so much for joining me and being able and open to talking about it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Looking forward to share my story.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we should just jump right into it. Where does this story start? Because I mean, I don't know much from the before times. I don't know if you were a big mental health guy or advocate before it, but your very unique circumstance and the incident which you are about to tell that happened to you that started everything, you know, it's something none of us think about. And I was actually just having a conversation today with somebody about how a single moment, a single phone call can literally change the whole trajectory of everything about your life. And I think this really goes to it. So let's start right at the beginning here, and I'll let you tell the story the way you want it to be told.
Sure, man. So I think maybe to even hop before the shooting or really anything happened. I know you were asking if I'm a big mental health advocate before. I think one thing that played really well into my recovery is my entire friend group. Everyone's unbelievably supportive. I've had friends go through mental health struggles. I've been through my own mental health struggles. I think it's something, especially in the growing age of social media and the virtual world, that's really become more prevalent. But I've been fortunate enough through my incident and before that to have an unbelievable support group around me, whether that's my friends, my family, everybody, creating kind of an open platform for me to bring any issues I've ever had, or for them to bring issues that they've had to me. So even before I get into my story, I think that's a huge shout out to them. And they played such a critical role in allowing me to respond so positively to what I went through. So in terms of the actual uniqueness of my story, so for those of you who are listening who don't really know, basically what happened is I was just going to my barber shop, ergo why my hair is a little long now, about just over a year ago. And walking into the barber shop, I just happened to get caught in a drive-by shooting. So basically, yeah, just walking right in, I guess there was a target who they were aiming at who happened to be outside the shop, who owned one of the neighboring businesses. And he saw everything kind of unfolding before I did. Obviously, I wasn't anticipating a drive-by shooting walking in to get my hair cut. And I saw him run inside the door, and I guess the owner's wife was holding the door, so I kind of like ushered her in, and then got caught third man in line, trying to get to safety, which resulted in me taking 3 bullets out of the 4. I think they got the target once. I really, I haven't followed up on the investigation as much as I'm sure most people would in my circumstances. But I happened to take 1 bullet in the chest, which at the night of the shooting was by far my biggest personal concern, right? Like bullet to the chest, obviously your heart's right there, like on the side of my heart too, right? So your heart's there, your lungs, that's the scariest part when you're not overly informed in the actual like medical side of things. And then I happened to take 1 bullet in my right leg and 1 in my left leg. The left leg was kind of like a non-factor. The right leg hit me in the femoral artery though, which is like, I think I was talking to my doctors, I think literally the second worst place you can get shot outside of like the jugular. So it's actually, you have a higher chance of survival getting shot like in the head than you do the femoral artery, just because your bleed out risk is so high, right? Granted, like if you get shot in the head, you're probably going to be like a vegetable. Like it's not going to be a good response for you, but your chance of survival is higher. Where I got super lucky is there happened to be a cop literally getting a coffee or something across the street at the time of the shooting, and it was called in right away by a neighbor. So the cop rushed over like the second gunshots were fired, got there in like literally sprinted, like left his car at the Tim Hortons and sprinted across the street. Got a tourniquet on my leg in I think 4 minutes, and I was told that if it was 4.5 minutes, I was probably dead. So the 30 seconds of that guy running literally saved my life. So very fortunate. I got rushed into surgery the night of. They actually cleared out like an entire floor in the hospital for me. And I was right at the shift change. So it was like 5:45 that everything happened. So I had the day surgeons and the night surgeons all there, like, prepping me and getting me ready for surgery. And I know, I was fortunate enough to call my mom and kind of let her know about everything. And what they were told was I had a 50-50 chance of survival the night of, and even less likelihood of keeping my leg. So obviously it was what should have been a scary night. For whatever reason, I handled things really well. And in my mind, there was never really a doubt that I was going to be able to get back to, relatively good health. Maybe that's just that kind of like positive voice in my head. I have no idea. But, I'm sure it was scary as hell for my parents. So
Yeah.
it was a weird circumstance for sure. But I think in the same breath, it's something I'm unbelievably fortunate to have gone through at this point, knowing how well I've managed to recover, because it allows me an open platform to talk about my story, but also use it to, I think, address a lot of like more important issues, right? And kind of like speak to people that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to speak to. So, that's the brunt of it. I think there's 1,000 more kind of microcosms that we could get into and talk about, and I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of them. But that's, for everyone who's unfamiliar with me, that's kind of like the overview of everything that happened the night of that led to me being on your podcast today with you.
And I always feel weird that like these like super traumatic incidents that happen to people are like what brings me to like meeting them and chatting them. But I think it's not unfamiliar from my circumstance, right? Like the thing that changed my life was trying to take my own life and then telling people about it on social media, right? And this event that surrounded my life, and maybe the darkest, scariest moment, like led to this light of being able to change and be better and help people. And that goes to you. And we're going to talk about hit the ground running and some of your recovery. But like, I mean, share with, I know we talked before, but share with what you're comfortable. But especially in Canada, I know I have American listeners, but in Canada, like gun violence is so foreign to a lot of us. And to be in that situation, to feel what it's like to be shot, right? Like I think you were kind of mentioning that when you got shot in the chest, right? You're like thinking about your heart, lungs, because you're not familiar with the anatomy. And all I'm thinking about is like the movies. I've never like what would happen in the movies. Like, can you go a little deeper into what the feelings were like during that moment? Were you scared? Were you like just confused? Like, what did it like feel like being shot? Like, just kind of talk a little bit about that to like really set the scene.
Sure, Ben. And hey, first off, I just want to say I think it's really great what you're doing as well. And I think like going through your own unique experiences and using that to create a platform to, I think, change the world in a positive way. And you found that purpose, in your own life. I think that's amazing. So I just want to kind of say that. But I also probably responded like a little bit of a psychopath, I think, going through everything that I went through. So it's crazy to me even knowing that this is where my brain went. But after I got shot and I'm like on the ground bleeding out, there was never like oh shit, like I'm gonna die, like there's a bullet hole in my chest, there's a bullet hole in my leg, like I'm in trouble, right? It was kind of, I remember the first thing I was thinking about was like, well, this sucks, but like I'm gonna have a little bit of time off work, I can read some of the books I've wanted to read the last little bit, maybe I take some online courses, like, kind of grow, focus on some personal growth here. And I think I think that, so sorry, right after that, I guess I literally was like, oh, like shit, actually you should be thinking about your family, Brandon, like you might not make it, like you should think about the things that are important to you. And I think like looking back, I think that's really like a testament to thinking about my family, because my parents are the ones who I think instilled a lot of those values in me. But it was also responding in a positive manner, right? It's like you have so much adrenaline going, you don't really feel the actual sting of the bullets. Like there's no crazy pain or anything. It's more so like a personal mental battle, right? And in my own mind, there was no way that I wasn't going to make it through, right? There was no way that I was going to let this be the barrier to my future success in life, or my future happiness, right? So that's where like my directed mind was basically sent right from the start. And I think I continued that basically from, I think day 3 in the hospital. The first 2 days, I had a lot of support, and I was also on a lot of pain medication. So I really kind of was, you know, a bit of just a ghost in there for the first couple days. But that was kind of what the response was like. So I know you hear all different kinds of stories, and I've spoken to other people who've gotten shot and have responded a lot differently. And you know, in a weird way, I've ended up connecting. You never expect something like that to happen to anybody you know, like much less yourself, right? So especially in Canada, obviously you see a lot more incidences. I'm sure there's a lot more people, so like correlation's a little bit different in the States. But you never expect something like that to happen to yourself, obviously. So it's a weird thing to have to respond to. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know, it hurt. But I remember like it hurt like later. So like I think 2 hours into the night, I remember like the adrenaline starts to wear off. And I remember my dad is in the hospital with me. Fortunately, with COVID rules, I was allowed one parent. So my dad got to be in there with me. And I remember looking at him and just being like, man, this hurts so much now. The adrenaline's gone. Like the tourniquet is like cut off, all blood flow to my leg. And he just looks at me, he's like, that's great news. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, man, if your leg hurts, that means it's still there. And it puts everything in perspective, right? It's like, you know what? I'm going to beat this. I'm going to come through this. I'm going to come through this not only healthy, but I'm going to come through this a better, more matured person, right? And I think once you start understanding that using something like that can be used as not just you know, like I don't want everyone feeling sorry for me. I can use this as a personal growth opportunity that creates a little bit of competitive advantage of my own unique life, and provides me with, I think, a little bit of mental callus, if anything. You can really gain a lot from any sort of experience like that. So, you know, there was some shitty parts for sure, but at the end of the day, I had a million positives and, you know, 3 big negatives. And like the scales were so heavily tipped in the positive, I couldn't allow myself to feel bad or sorry for myself, even the pain, you know. I think another thing I've talked about a little bit in some of my Instagram videos is when the idea for Hit the Ground Running, which I know we'll talk about later, came day 3 in the hospital. And I remember I had a journal and I basically wrote down, I was like, get off the pain medication, stop feeling sorry for yourself. You know, like this is it. You've had your opportunity to feel bad. Use this to make a difference for others and find some purpose and value in your own life. And that's going to make everything that you've gone through so worth your while, right? So I think it was the perspective, if anything, sorry, but I think like the mental component was the biggest thing for me, right? But it was also, that was all fueled by the support I had around me as well, right? Like I think that story of my dad is my favorite part of the entire experience for me, where he was just like, yeah, it's gonna hurt. It's not gonna be a fun recovery process, but at the end of the day, you're gonna be much better for it. And you're also so unbelievably fortunate. You know, count your blessings. Don't sit there and wallow in self-pity. Just take what you've been through, use it to grow and get better. So I think at the end of the day, that was kind of my mindset from the start. But you know, that's probably that's what it feels like to get shot in a long scale answer, because it's not just as easy as like it stung, because the mental impact is so much more than the actual pain of the bullets.
It's interesting. And I think there's something to be said. You mentioned journaling, which I know is something I've talked about a lot, but something to be said that you were talking about your family and your support system even before this all happened, and how you just had like a baseline good level of mental health and awareness and all those things, and how I think that could be applied to anything in life. That if, you know, you have those strong kind of values and things that you've already like built your life upon, that when adversity happens, as my fucking computer starts going all over the place, as something bad happens, that you're able to respond like in a way that you did in incredibly traumatic circumstances. There was a time though, like I was reading some of your story that's featured on your website, that you weren't sure about your leg, that was like a concern at one point, and you know, you didn't know if you would be able to keep it. That's why what your dad said is such a big thing. But
Yep.
also that like the recovery was like from this leg that, you know, you couldn't even move.
Yep. So, you know, like I think the craziest part of that, again, that's where I say like I was so unbelievably lucky, right? And I know going into surgery the night of, they didn't tell me too much about that, but I had a sneaky suspicion that that's something that they might consider, right? Would be just chopping my leg and saving my life if those were the two choices, right? And I remember the last words I said before going under in surgery was, I looked at my doctor, I said, if you have to kill me, but do every single thing you can to keep my leg. And you know, that's the one area that stressed me out for sure of the night. That was maybe the only component. And I think, you know, it's hard to say how you would respond if circumstances were different. And I think that's when I say I was unbelievably fortunate in my recovery process to wake up in the next morning in my hospital bed with my own leg still attached to my body. I had some pretty wicked scars. You know, my leg was like fully sliced down both sides as much as it could be, and then same with my left leg. It was all torn up, but it was there, right? And that's where I looked at myself from the start and was like, man, you're so damn lucky. There's so many people don't have the same ability to recover it as you're going to. Don't waste it, right? And you know, it's really hard to say how I would have responded if things had gone the opposite. I don't know, and I'm sure, you know, I like to think as a positive person that I would have responded positively, and I would have, you know, still continued down the same path that I'm going right now. But I have no idea. I really do. Or sorry, I really don't. And you know, I was really lucky, and again, that was one of the factors that again continued to motivate me, I think. And it also gave me a little bit of perspective in the sense that what I want to do with Hit the Ground Running is help all sorts of trauma victims, right? Get to their highest level of new normal. And some people aren't going to be as lucky as me. Some people are going to be as lucky as me. I want to help out across the board, right? And so like, yeah, it's hard to put in perspective for sure. That was my biggest fear for sure the night of, and you know, that was also my biggest motivating factor. Waking up the next morning and coming out of things, right? Like I had to kind of relearn how to walk. I couldn't walk for what I think like 3 weeks maybe afterwards. I couldn't even really move for 2 weeks. But knowing that there was light at the end of the tunnel in the event that I pushed myself as hard as I could was really what kept me going. And I know like you know, in my physio and everything, in terms of the actual recovery process, it was way more painful. Like you talk about pain of getting shot, it was 1,000 times more painful pushing myself intensely through physio, and it wasn't even close. Like there's my physio is telling me to bite down on a pillow and basically just hold on for dear life as he bends my leg back into shape from an immobile state. It was much more painful, but I know because I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to keep my leg, there was nothing I could do. You know, I couldn't complain about it. What was I going to do? Just sit there and waste the second chance I'd been given? So, you know, that's the one area for sure that was the biggest blessing for me, you know, and it's allowed me to I think do some really cool things. Like I'm running now, I'm back to, you know, relatively normal states. So that was my biggest concern for sure the night of. I know my parents had kind of come to peace with it. It's funny, I actually talked to my mom about this the other day, and she was basically saying like we basically accepted the fact that you were probably going to have one leg, but like that you'd be alive. And you know, they were just kind of happy that I'd be there. So to have, you know, have everything kind of stay the same outside of you know, a whole different perspective on life, I got so damn lucky, man. And that's one of the biggest drivers for me. I don't know, like that's, yeah, it's wild.
So where does the running come in? Because obviously you said like how painful recovery was, and I think that's something I never even thought about. Like when you see people in those recovery videos, you know, you're always happy for them. You're like, yeah, like good for them, we're proud of you. But you know, you just saying that is like, oh shit, like they're probably in an immense amount of pain, and like it's probably the worst thing ever. But were you a runner before, and it's something that you were just like, you know, like my goal is to pick it back up, or is it something that was like totally new to you, and that it really like you're like that's the goal now?
Yeah, so I'll give you a twofold answer. And the first, I just want to kind of touch on the pain of physio. You know, I'll give a huge shout out here. Like my buddy Francois Duquette was on CERB because he couldn't take his national physio exam after graduating university in physio. You know, he's got his master's in physio. So I was basically his summer project. So the timing, you know, selfishly lined up amazing. I was able to work with him every day. And I was doing physio once a week with another, like a clinic, and it didn't really do a whole lot for me. They'd hook you up to a stim, you know, they'd give you like they don't want to hurt you treatment. And then working with Frank, he was basically like, I know what your shape was before. I know, you know, how competitive you are. And I know that you have a high threshold for pain. Push, man. And that's, I'm so unbelievably fortunate to have had that guy in my life in my recovery process. You know, so huge shout out to him there for putting me through that pain. I'd do it all again. And anyone who's in the same sort of circumstance, I'd recommend it, because it's going to suck at the time, but you're going to get so much. I blew up my initial timelines by probably 8 months.
Wow.
Because of how hard we worked together. So, you know, it's a lot of pain, but it's worth it. Sorry, what was the second part? Oh, the running.
Yeah.
Yeah. So running was something I did a lot when I was a kid. Never really recently, you know, like 5K, 10K, whatever, but I've never been like a big distance runner. Well, sorry, not never. When I was like, I don't know, like grade school, I used to run track and stuff, and I used to be all right at it, but I was never like, you know, a diehard running guy or anything. It's kind of boring to run like 2 hours straight, you know. But I just kind of saw it as that's the ultimate challenge, right? Like I've got this leg, you know, I've got a few issues with it for sure. The strength is kind of coming back, but my nerves in my right foot are basically destroyed. I've got like compartment syndrome in the right leg now. So fortunately it's only in like the lower quadrant of my right leg. So it only really impacts the sensation on my foot, which is like whatever, you know, like if I'm swimming, it feels like I've got no skin. That's kind of weird. But like other than that, I don't know, like I can push through it.
So sorry, what is compartment syndrome? What kind of, like, can you just kind of describe that a little?
Yeah, so basically the way that I don't know, like I don't know enough about it. I just kind of like, this is what the doctors tell me. But like the bottom right, so your leg's broken up into like multiple quadrants, and the bottom quadrant of my leg, because the trauma to my right leg was so severe, the blood flow was so heavily impacted. And I guess it impacted the one quadrant of my leg like much more. So there's a couple nerves that are detached from, I don't know, their muscles, something. But regardless, all I know is that my foot sensitivity is very, very high right now. And the big toe. So when you're running or, you know, even walking, your foot kind of operates like your big toe is your push off, right? So the extension is really important for kind of like your bounce. Everything else in my foot works and my closing in my foot works, but like my big toe doesn't extend. So it kind of messes up my push off of running. So I've developed this like massive front calf looking thing that's actually my tibialis anterior is the name of it. That's overcompensating right now for my lack of mobility in my toe, which is attached to the nerve function not working. So again, I'm not a doctor. I just, you know, I just kind of follow what I'm being told, and we try some fun stuff. So like to try to get some of the nerve sensitivity back or nerve sensation back, we're trying to do this thing called mirror therapy. So I'm taking my left foot and I'm putting a mirror in between my feet, and I'm covering my right foot with a towel, and then I'm moving my left toe up and down to try to trick my brain into thinking that it's my right toe because I'm staring at the mirror. And like we're trying to like confuse me into thinking that my nerves work, so then my brain will start sending waves down there. It's the whole weird thing, but you know, at the end of the day, I can still run, right? So like after this, I'm gonna be running 22 kilometers tonight with a couple of my buddies. So
in the rain, wow.
Dedication. The rain's great. It's not too hot. But yeah, you know, it was also a cool thing too, where it's, you know, for me from a personal standpoint, I think it was kind of like the ultimate kind of like fuck you to the incident, right? Like it was, if I can overcome that, like that's the best personal goal that I could think of to accomplish. And I needed something to push for, I think, in my recovery process. And I think for finding like value and purpose, Hit the Ground Running is fantastic because I can use what I've done to make a big difference. And then my competitive edge is like, well, we also want to do something physical because we want to push your body to not just recover, but get to the best shape you've ever been. So that's kind of where the running came in. And I'm fortunate to have a good group of guys who are not only running, but are kind of, excited to start running with me. No real runners in the group, just all kind of washed up hockey or other athletes who are excited to take on a bit of a new challenge. But yeah, for me, I thought it was one of like the coolest, I don't know, goals that we could do without really having to stress too much, just have to kind of put our mind to it and go. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun though.
Yeah, no, and running is one of those things where like you don't need a whole lot. And if you're cool with running in the snow and rain, then you can pretty much do it anytime, right? There's not a lot of, even especially with COVID, right? Like if you were like, we're gonna lift weights, and it's like all of a sudden we keep going into lockdown, because the timing of this, all we have to consider is how all the other obstacles of having to deal with the pandemic on top of all this and all the restrictions, that just adds to it. You mentioned day 3. You're sitting there in the hospital, you're just kind of coming off the pain medication in some ways, and you're already thinking about, okay, how am I going to use this opportunity to help other people, right? You've already shifted the focus off yourself, and you're like, how am I going to like impact people? And you're coming up with this whole idea for an organization. Like, did you have any experience in this at all beforehand? And like, just talk to me about creating this whole new organization, and the mission behind it, and some of the work that you've been doing since you developed it.
Yeah, so I had no experience before, like absolutely none. Like my background is in like management and sales, consulting, that kind of stuff. So definitely far from a not-for-profit a background, at least. But I think I was in I don't want to say a dark place, because I had so much support, but a confusing place, right? I think is probably the best way to put it, where you've been thrown like the ultimate curveball in life, right? You never expect something like that happening to you. And in a weird way, like I'm happy it was me and not someone in my immediate family or close circle of friends, because it would have hurt me a lot more not having control over the situation. So in that way, I was kind of fortunate. And I knew I didn't want to just sit back and feel sorry for myself, and I needed something to do during my recovery process that was going to be a passion project for me, and allow me to use what should have been the biggest barrier to success and the biggest obstacle in my life in a positive spin to make difference in the world, right? And I think at the end of the day, you especially, like you kind of like you said with what you're doing, like the ultimate goal, I think, for most people is to make their name mean something, right? Like I don't want to look back when I'm 100 years old and be like, damn, I wish I had made the world a better place, but I didn't, right? And maybe not everyone's like wired like that, I have no idea, but for me, it gave me a lot of purpose in a really dark time, and it helped me see some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think I'm also, I realized that I was unbelievably fortunate to have a great team of not just like close friends and family, but a great team of my network. I had thousands of people reach out to me, and many of whom like I didn't know before, who shared their own crazy stories and traumas and experiences with me. A lot of whom don't feel comfortable talking to a lot of other people about them, but they found some kind of trust in me because of what I'd been through, right? And when you see how many people struggle with that kind of stuff on a day-to-day, like maybe this is more so like outside of day 3. Day 3 was just like, I want to make a difference. But over the course of time, you see how many people struggle with this stuff, and how many people are somehow indirectly or directly impacted, especially by trauma. You want to make a difference, right? And you see, I saw this as a bit of an opportunity for me to take what I've been through and find some purpose. And I think that made me from the start a lot more comfortable going through everything that I've been through. And I mean, one of the biggest things that was probably the toughest for me, and the reason I took, I think I took long to get everything started, because it's a year out now, and here we are. I started things probably 3 months ago, so 8 months after getting shot, which some people might say like isn't long enough to wait. But I felt like it took a really long time. And I think a big part of that is because I lost comfortability maybe in my own skin a little bit. Like I used to take like the whole, like, you know, my last name Peacock is obviously like a kind of like a symbol of who I am. And I always wore it super proudly, you know, like I had sweaters with my last name on it from hockey, like shirts, whatever, that I'd go to the gym in. And I stopped doing that for a while because I was scared, right? Like I don't know who these people are. Like, what if they want something with me? Like, what if they're, you know, they see me speaking out, and they're not okay with that, all this stuff. Um, and then I realized if I'm able to get my story out there, no matter how scared I am, you know, no matter how fearful I am of the ramifications, and I can reach the right people and make a difference in their lives, I could literally die tomorrow and be happy, right? Um, so it helped me find a lot of purpose, like I said. And I think it also helped me overcome a lot of the PTSD, a lot of the fears that I had associated with my unique circumstance by being able to make a difference in other people's lives. Because I think that weighs so much more than the fear that I had, right? So, yeah, I mean, that was really what fueled me from the start and moving forward. I think the start was I wanted to find a little bit of purpose and make a difference. And then as we moved forward and I started interacting with a lot more people who had their own unique experiences, it really just pushed it over the top and really got me excited to move forward with the next steps of what we're doing. And that's what continues to fuel me now, man. Like I wish, you know, I wish I could be having on 10 grantees right now, working with, supporting them through their unique recovery processes. Right now, if we had the money for it, I'd love to do it, right? And that's why I'm really looking forward for opportunities for growth, because I think we can make a great difference in a part of the community that's super, super underfunded right now, and they don't get any, it doesn't get any attention either, right? It's very easy to sweep it under the rug because it's not that common. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more common than you think to deal with a lot of these traumas. So, you know, I've got a million reasons why I want to do what I'm doing right now, but those are the biggest ones for sure.
Yeah, it's amazing how many times you see like GoFundMe's for stuff like this. I mean, especially in the States, but in Canada too, right? Because people like just for everything in this life, if it doesn't affect you, a lot of people have a really hard time like just grasping the gravity of everything. Out of sight, out of mind. Just you put your blinders on, and everyone's like, "Well, nothing bad's happening," and it's racism, that's misogyny, it's mental illness, it's trauma, all these different things. Um, and just a quick aside, listening you tell that story of, you know, people reaching out to you and how you fueled you to make a difference. I mean, like so many parallels with me. That's exactly what happened when I first shared my story, is how many people reached out and continue to do so. And it's like, holy shit, like this problem is so much more than I could ever imagine. And it's amazing. I always say it's like the whole kind of like cliche of like, you're not alone. And I'm like, it's great, but at the same time, it's like, wow, it really is kind of morbid that we're forming this bond off of like these shitty situations. But it's true that like we have these bonds and these mutual kind of commonalities between each other, and we form these little communities based on things that we relate, and especially bad things that have happened. I do
It's
want
hard
to
to
touch
truly
on,
understand if you don't, like, if you've
yeah,
never been through
it's
something like
true.
that,
You
it's
find good
hard, right?
people.
So like, but in the same breath, I think once you go through something like that, and sorry, I didn't want to cut you off
Oh no, it's
there,
okay.
but like some of like my buddy Michael O2 now is a guy, he went through his own unique circumstance. I don't want to touch too much on it because I don't know, it's super public, but I don't know what I can and can't say. But he was one of the guys who had his own life altering experience a couple of years ago, and I never knew who he was at that point. I knew him through like a couple mutual friends, and that was it. And he reached out to me like day one in the hospital after seeing everything that had happened to me, and was like a role model for me, right? This kid who's a year older than me, who I'm now buddies with. I'm doing the whole HTGR thing with him because he was such a catalyst in my unique recovery and my understanding of what I'd been through. So I think creating a network where people who've gone through unique hardships in life can, you know, talk about not just like, I don't like the idea, and maybe it sounds a little crude, but like of like getting together and maybe like wallowing and like feeling sorry for each other. But I liked that he was there and he was like, I've been through this, it's gonna suck, man. And like, you know what, you might want to feel bad for yourself some days. Don't allow yourself to channel that, fuel that in your recovery process. Be open, talk with people, always look for help if you need it, but understand that I'm going to be here for you, whatever you need, because I know how tough it's going to be. And that was one of the most important, one of the most important people I met in the entire last year, right? Because he had those same lived experiences. So, shout out O2 if you're watching this. It's critical that we're able to kind of form these relationships with people who've gone through unique, like experiences. And that's where I'm so with you about like talking about all this stuff and being so open. I think it's so unbelievably important. And I'm really happy that we're trending that direction in society. I know we're not fully there yet, but I think we've seen a lot of positive change in the last few years in that regard. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's peer support. And that's a huge growing movement in the mental health community. But I think it's super crucial for men too. It's one thing to open up to a professional, which is great, always encouraged. It's one thing to open up to your mom or your dad or your girlfriend, your partner, whoever, but just forming that bond where we create safe spaces for men, with men who get it and understand it, and no shame, no judgment, all that different stuff. Super crucial, and I think is very important as we move forward. I do want to talk, we've talked about the physical recovery, right? But what was you said PTSD. That's something I've covered before and we talked about, and it's very serious. What was the mental recovery like for this? Because this whole thing, like, you've had a smile on, you're talking about how lucky you are, how positive mindset. I mean, I love that. All that's great. And if that's how it completely worked out for you, like, amazing. But what was like the mental recovery like for you? Were there dark times, bad dreams? Like, what kind of happened?
Yeah, so the dreams is maybe a funny one, and then I'll touch on some of the other stuff. So I dream super lucid, which is a weird thing to go through when you've been shot. So in the hospital, one of the reasons I was, so sedated for the first 3 days was I was taking my pain meds every time I can get them because they'd knock me out. And in my dreams, it was basically like I was running around doing normal stuff. Like, it wasn't like I was on the moon or something. It was like I was just doing normal human things, and it was like an escape for me, right? So that was a weird kind of thing that I journaled about a lot my first couple days, and that was a big catalyst as to why I actually got off my pain meds on day 3 too, because I didn't want to keep escaping reality like that. So I wanted to face the harsh reality that it was going to be a long road ahead, and I was going to have to sit there and maybe read or just wait it out till I could start moving again. But I wanted to be present. After that, I had some weird dreams too. Again, being super lucid with my dreams. Like, I remember one of them really well, actually, that happened probably 6 months out. So it wasn't that recent to the injury, but like, in that dream in particular, I remember like there was a shooting circumstance, but like I responded well, right? Like, in my mind, it was like, you know what, you're in control of the story now. You're in control of the situation. Like, these guys are shooting at me, and I kind of like ran, hid, and fought back, right? And that probably sounds a little bit crazy. Like, I'm the last guy who's ever gonna, shoot somebody. I'm the last guy who's ever gonna hold any resentment either. Like, I don't know who shot me. I don't really give a shit who shot me. I'm sure if you ask my mom, and there's some news articles out, maybe she knows, but I could care less, man. Like, I don't hold any resentment for these guys. I don't want the book thrown at them. Like, I don't know their stories. I don't give a shit. Like, I'm alive. I've had the opportunity to recover. I hope you don't put anyone else in harm's way. That's all that I care about, right? I hope that you see what happens and you're like, holy shit, I made a mistake. And I don't know. I have no idea how they'll respond, but it's not going to do me any good to hold resentment. So I think that's maybe important to address, but the dreams were weird. PTSD was something that was very real for me too. And I think I probably approached my PTSD recovery again like a bit of a psychopath. So it was a little bit different than I think most. I did a little bit of psychotherapy, and I didn't particularly like it. And it wasn't that I don't see value in therapy. I really do. Like, really, really do. And that's a big thing I want to do with Hit the Ground Running, is provide those resources for the people who they'll benefit. But I had a really fortunate, wealth of knowledge that I had consumed before psychotherapy through friends of mine who were in the field, and book recommendations that I was able to read and learn about my unique PTSD circumstances that I was going to be facing and how to challenge them, right? And how to do my best to overcome them, and feel kind of comfortable in my own skin again, right? So I remember one of the best examples is the start of September. So I lived with my parents in July and August during my recovery. Then September 1st, I moved out. And I remember going to the gym the first day I moved out, like after seeing my mom all day. And she kind of got in my head a little bit where she's talking about, like be careful with what you're doing, like make sure your doors are locked, like all these things where like she's a little bit scared for me. Like she doesn't know, like it's like her baby leaving the nest, right? Like her baby almost died. She's going to do everything to fight for this guy. And now in the back of my head, I remember driving to the gym and I looked at probably 1,000 cars and I was like so fogged, so horrified. Every car I'm looking at, I'm like, this guy's going to shoot me. This guy's going to shoot me. It was in another dimension, right? And it was obviously in the back of my head. I'm like, you're being irrational, man. Like, calm down. Like, it's okay. Like, you're going to be all right. But you can't fight it, right? It's just something that you kind of have to deal with. And at that point, I was obviously very, very invested in my recovery as well. I was just, hobbling around. So I drive to the gym. I'm not going to miss my gym session because I'm stressed out, right? My time was too valuable. Like I have a year to get back to full health. I'm not going to waste a second of it. So I get to the gym, and I just remember, man, like I'm looking at cars like in the parking lot from the bike upstairs. Like I'm trying to like assess what cars are there, and like, is this a car that looks like from one of the guys who shot me? Like, is this the car? Is this the car? And like, I'm looking at people and anyone who's like, remotely looking at me the wrong way. Like they probably didn't even notice me, but I'm like, psychoanalyzing them and I'm all stressed out. Like I'm looking, up, down, left, right, like trying to make sure I'm aware of all my surroundings at all times. And then I started doing what's called emotional, or was it emotional? I maybe emotional response therapy. I don't know. I started putting myself, exposure therapy. Sorry, that's what it's called. And I kind of came home that night in like a panic attack, man. Like I was like just like couldn't breathe, like freaking out. And I was like, you know what? Like screw this, man. Like I can't live like this for the rest of my life. So I did a lot of reading. I read for like 2 hours and I read about exposure therapy that night. And I went out, and I could barely run at this point, granted, but I went out for like a 2.5K, like hobble, not a jog, but like a hobble at like 12:30 at night through like the kind of projects of Lower Town, to put myself in a situation that scared the hell out of me at that point, right? But I did it, and then I did it again, and then I did it again, and then I got my roommates when I was, not looking, to start popping balloons and stuff at me. Yeah, and it sketched me out a little bit at first, but then I was like, holy shit, you're being a little unreasonable, man. Like it's okay. Like you're gonna be all right. And I needed to see that, right? I needed to see that these things were making me uncomfortable were just figments of my mind, right? That had been altered because of what I'd been through. And I know that it's never gonna be the same situational response, and it's never gonna be the same a method of salvation for everybody, but that's kind of what would solve things for me, and obviously with that being said, like I for sure, my PTSD, I wouldn't say is too bad now, and again, that's fingers crossed. I know that's going to be something that somehow stays with me in some figment for the rest of my life, but it's gotten so much better because I faced it head on, and I think I think that was like the biggest thing I could have ever done. It would have continued to cripple me if I hadn't said, you know what, I'm not going to allow myself to live like this. I can't, right? And I did so much learning about what could make me feel better, and I found one unique solution that did. And I think time also helped heal everything for sure, but it was really just grabbing the bull by the horns, man, and like putting yourself in situations that make you feel uncomfortable. And I'm not someone who was without some of this stuff before. I've had my fair battles with depression and anxiety, as I think many do. And anxiety still hits me a ton, especially if I drink, man. Like if I'm drinking a couple of days in a row, the week after is going to be rough. And I think that's a big reason why I've stopped drinking. To, you know, I still drink every now and again, don't get me wrong, but to the same extent that I did before, because that anxiety fueled with kind of the PTSD is crippling. So, you know, it's been a unique learning process for me. I think, like, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and how to kind of overcome everything. But I think when you factor in the exposure therapy and the fact that, like I said before, I put my name back out there, right? I put myself in a situation that I might not have been at the time comfortable with. But now, knowing that I'm doing something for the betterment of the overall community and not myself, brings me so much happiness, and I think purpose and value, that it supersedes some of these fears that I might have otherwise had, like I said before. So it's been a strange process for sure. And there's been some dark times, as there's going to be for anybody who goes through something like I've been through. And I know I'm a pretty positive guy, and I definitely gave that you know, that vibe off since probably day one in the hospital. You know, I literally woke up and kissed my nurse. I was so happy to be alive. Like, I've done that. You know, it's hard to knock this big smile off my face, but there's been some struggles for sure. And I think it's always really important to address those. And it's really important to understand, it's more important to understand your struggles, I think, than it is to understand your failures. Because if you understand your struggles, you can understand, I think, how to manage them better and mitigate the damage that they have on you, right? So it was a weird year for sure.
Yeah.
But a year out now, man, I'm so damn lucky. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people who might not have struggled, or kind of struggled, but haven't seen, like, I don't know, like the spiritual side of it, like the once you get through it and you just kind of, like, you see it all so broadly, that, like,
Mhm.
the path to recovery, the path of healing, all of that, it's never linear. It's never just like you're here and you're, you know, you're just like, okay, now I'm walking, now I'm running, now I have this thing, right? And just like it's all up, right? Like it's just like a giant wave of ups and downs and moment to moment. Like, some people are like, oh, I have bad days and good days. Like, I'm like, man, sometimes I have like bad minutes and good minutes, right? Like, it just can, sometimes it just shifts like that.
You just walk outside and the sun's hitting you a little differently. It's like, you know, this
Yeah,
isn't too
you
bad.
know, but it's being able to, I think, being at your worst, also seeing the best and appreciating that a little bit more. And I want to get
Yeah,
into that.
that was the best point, man. Sorry again, I'm talking so much, I
I love
cut you
it. No,
off,
it's
but
all
like,
good. That's why we have podcasts.
but like, literally, it's so fulfilling to get to your lowest point, because once you get there, every other high that you're gonna have feels so much damn better, man. It really does. And I like, it maybe sounds a little cliche to say, but I admire so much people who've gone through all these hardships in life, because they're the happiest people. If you don't face any sort of obstacles or any barriers to, you know, self-fulfillment over the course of your life, you're never going to be happy, man, ever. I think, at least, I'm a genuine believer in putting yourself in uncomfortable positions and
Mhm.
understanding that you're going to have to struggle, and sometimes, man, it's going to hurt. And I think, you know, I like to think that that wasn't the way, but the happiest I've ever been in my entire life is probably the last year. And that's, you know, I was doing 8-hour rehab days for 3 months, right? And it's
Mm.
the happiest I've ever been. Like, I wasn't like worried about, you know, what Susie was posting on Instagram, or what, you know, what Buddy was doing in NHL 21 or something. Like, I was just happy to be in the moment and be alive, and know that I was still here, right? Um, so yeah, I don't know. Again, I don't want to cut you off, but that's something that I think is really important to acknowledge.
Yeah, such a good point, especially with social media, right? Like, it just,
Yeah.
your perspective changed. And I was gonna ask, you know, now that what we just talked about, like you going through this and coming out the other side with this new perspective, people are opening up to you, sharing their path to recovery, their stories of trauma, the things they struggle with. You know, it just probably opened so many doors for you, and avenues you've never even thought about. What are some of the biggest things you've learned? Some of the biggest takeaways through your process, through hearing about other people's process, that maybe have really impacted you in your life?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. You know,
It's a big
I've
question.
learned
Yeah.
I've learned so much. It's hard to break it down, I think, to just one thing. But I think from a personal standpoint, I was always more of maybe like a Machiavellian type guy, where I was a little bit cynical on the world.
Mm,
You know, I was always very personally optimistic, but I had a lot less maybe trust in people being good than I should have. And from what I've gathered, man, people are good so long as you treat them good, right? And I think that's one thing that I found really cool to learn over the last year that I otherwise probably never would have said, right? If you asked 2 years ago me, if you asked 2 years ago my dad, we would have responded the same way. And now we've both kind of maybe turned this new leaf where we've seen the unbelievable good that there is out there, unbelievable good. And I think when it comes to sharing your unique experiences and your stories, I'm always happy to listen. Anyone who listens to this and is struggling with whatever, like reach out to me. I'm sure, reach out to you. Yeah, I know you're as willing to talk, but it's always so important, man, to have someone in your corner, and someone who cares about you. And I think a lot of time people are afraid to set themselves up in those situations because they don't think people are willing to listen or care, and that's not the case at all. I think it's really important to be open, be trusting, um be comfortable being vulnerable too, man. You know what, like if you were to talk about your story with depression to Joe down the road and he said he didn't give a shit, well, fuck Joe down the road. Right. Like, honestly, like, who cares about that guy, right? Like, that guy, whatever, he's got his own shit going on. Like, talk to someone else. Like, someone will listen. Someone is going to be there for you if you put yourself out there enough. And I think that's so unbelievably important to know. And again, I was so damn lucky, man, to have this support system, and I did. And I'm even more lucky now, I think, to have had the opportunity to talk to so many people who might have been lacking that support system or were fearful of reaching out to the people in their support system. And it's difficult. It's difficult to get back to everybody. Like, obviously, I'm
oh yeah.
sure with you too, like, you have so many people reach out, and you want to be there for everybody. Um, but try, like, be open. I think that's like the biggest thing. And there's so much more. I mean, I've also learned that the human body can do pretty damn amazing
Hmm.
things if you push it. Like I said, my initial physio said I wouldn't be able to run until February 2021. I was running in September 2020. He said there's no way I'd ever be able to, get back to as good health as I was before. I'm in 100 times better health than I was before. Um, all these things that if you put your mind to something and you really channel, I think, a positive outlook, the possibilities are endless, man. I think that, and again, maybe it sounds like, maybe it might be a polarizing thing to say, I don't know, but one thing that was really prevalent to my recovery process, and I know something that I was always put in my brain a lot as a kid, is it's really easy to see yourself as a victim of your circumstances, no matter what that is, right? Like, I was never from like a wealthy background. Like, I know kids who've had all sorts of struggles, man, and it's gonna suck for everybody. Everybody's got their own unique problems. Some have more problems, some have less problems. I don't know. But the second you allow yourself to stop moving forward, I think, is when you kind of shoot yourself in the foot, right? Like, no one's, as much as I want to be there to support you, I'm going to be there to support as many people as I can, but I can't jump into your skin and make a difference in your life, right? I think, like, accountability is something that's really important too. And that's something that, again, I was super damn lucky to have resources afforded to me, for free, granted. Like, there's not a chance I would have been able to pay for all the physio that I had over the last year. I probably wouldn't have been able to pay for a week's worth of physio that I had last year. But I had the opportunity to work hard and get through it, which is why I wanted, afford others that same opportunity.
Mm.
But if you have a chance to make something of yourself, do it, man. Like, it, honestly, I think it'll make you the happiest you could ever be. And that's the one thing I've learned. People want, a lot of people, I don't know, people want to see you succeed. And I think that's something that, it might be a controversial statement, because the only people who don't want to see you succeed are the people who are too lazy to do it themselves, right? And they just want to see everyone else fail. And I think people are a lot better than they often get credit for. So, I've learned so much, and I'm sure
Mhm.
there's like a billion more things I could say. But those are some of the things that I definitely, come to mind first for sure.
And as a runner, I'm sure you know who like David Goggins is, and
Yeah.
you know, that's someone who I always look to, at least for pushing yourself physically, where I'm like, man, if that guy can do those ridiculous things, like I can at least like go work out for an hour. Like it's
And
funny
so
when
you know Jesse Itzler.
that name sounds very familiar.
So Itzler does a book. So I actually heard about David Goggins through this guy. He's a part owner of the Atlanta Hawks. And he does a book where he hires Goggins to live with him for a month.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I know
So
the story you're referring
Itzler's
to.
like my favorite author. I've actually reached out to him. He was like, I messaged him, I think day 4 in the hospital. Super responsive on his Insta. Like I'm like, hey man, like this is kind of what happened to me. This is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you think? Kind of thing. And he's like, dude, I love it. Do it. Like, he sent me like a nutrition book for running, like these cool kind of
Oh,
things.
that's awesome.
Like he didn't send it to me. He like just gave me a recommendation, whatever. I'm not that famous yet, but you know, I think Goggins is a great guy to look to, in the sense that, you know, you don't have to be as hard as Goggins. Like no one's gonna be as hard as Goggins. Don't ever think you're gonna be as hard as Goggins. But just to understand that, you know, sometimes things are gonna suck. Like that's life, man. I've read Goggins' book. Like that's all. If you didn't read his book, that's all you need to know from it, because it's the, you know, the epitome of it. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like, yeah, you're right. Like you gotta embrace the suck sometime. You gotta just push through. And you're right, the people who don't want to do it, they're the ones who are gonna be trying to like bring you back down with them. And there's a lot to be said about that. And I understand there's circumstances that prevent people sometimes. I get all that, but there is a lot of truth to personal accountability and pushing through. I Before I let you go, I do want to like talk, because you've kind of sprinkled it throughout, and I haven't been a good host by keeping things on track. We've been bouncing back and forth, but some of the things you want to do with Hit the Ground Running, because you mentioned like paying for therapy, paying for recovery, like at the end of the day, what is like the main mission and goal, and some of the programs you really want to institute for people?
Yeah. So hey, first of all, that's probably some of my fault. I love to chat. So I probably could have gone for another 5 hours with you here. But yeah, you know, with Hit the Ground Running, there's a lot I want to do, but right now, like I got to keep it kind of focused for sure. So obviously we want to work with grantees in the city. So, sorry, the country, not just the city. We ideally start in Ottawa here as we continue to grow. But I want to be working with trauma victims who have similar mindsets to, I think, you and I, right? Like I want to work with people who might not have the opportunity to afford the resources to get, to that next level of success. But are willing to put in the time and the effort if they had those resources, right? And I've become very fortunate to make a lot of friends in both the physio and psychotherapy space in the city. So I've got some people I want to work with who I trust at this point, which I think is a big thing as well. In the sense that, you know, my first physio was a 10 out of 10 dude, but didn't push me to the, you know, the point I was capable of, right? Which ultimately probably would have crippled me for the rest of my life had I never got there. And you know, if he sees this, I love the guy. He probably also didn't push me that hard because I told him that I was doing other physio. But I want to make sure that I'm finding like motivated people who have gone through a hardship in life, and I want to guide them through that path to recovery. In the same way that I had people there, kind of holding my hand a little bit too, right? From the start, who were, you know, as a mentor. Like it's something that it's like every facet of life, right? If you go through something and you don't know how to do it and it's foreign to you, it's horrifying. It's scary, right? But with Hit the Ground Running, I want to be able to provide the resources to these people. That's the most important thing. But B, kind of provide them a little bit of mentorship too, right? Whether that's me or like whether that's the point we grow to a big enough space where we can create a network of mentors within the group who've all been through their own unique circumstances, right? And I know with this project obviously being my child now, I'll definitely want to be, you know, heading the front when we start it, when we get our first grantee or second grantee, third grantee, and you know, doing updates with these people and even going into physio with these guys, like literally just seeing what it's about and kind of coaching them through and offering them that like big brother role a little bit. But I just, you know, I understand how challenging it can be to go through such a life-altering circumstance, right? And I want to. It's not a space that's funded very well right now. There's very little. There was a victim support program in place that was taken out by the Ford government, I believe. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was Ford or the guy before. So I won't throw any slander or anything. I believe it was Ford though. I got a bit of a beef with that guy over the last year. But you know what? I was also in recovery the last year, so like benefit of getting shot is that like I didn't even have to worry about going out. I was locked up anyways. But yeah, like they used to have a program in place that was like a victim assistance support program that could offer you 10 to 15K for your recovery process and like psychotherapy and that kind of stuff. And I know a lot of people's insurance providers will cover X amount. My insurance after the first 2 months, so this was only in September when I was barely even remotely recovered because I had once a week physio through. Well, sorry, I was recovered, but had I been doing their physio, I wouldn't be recovered. They were sending me to physio once a week till September, where they agreed to send me like twice a week. And their purpose was to get me functional enough to sit at a desk again. Like, what the hell good is that going to do me in 20 years when I can't walk, but at least I can sit at a desk? What good's that going to do me in 2 years, right? I'm going to be a slug for the rest of my life who can't really find any joy. So I want to work with these people who are willing to put in that work to get to that extra level and get back to their new 100%, right? Whether that's like me, I think my new 100% is probably like 95% of where I was before because I lost the function of part of my right foot. But probably 98%. It's not that big of a deal, fortunately. It just kind of sucks. It hurts a little bit more sometimes, but I want to provide the opportunity for these people to get to that next level. And I think the mentorship is also a big thing. Like I said, there's so much I want to do with it. I want to create a platform where people can talk about this stuff too, right? I think one of the ultimate goals is I would like to be able to bring other trauma victims trauma survivors. Sorry, I hate the word victim. I get the importance of it, but I think it takes away a little bit from these guys who've survived like the hardest fucking thing they'll ever go through, right? But yeah, so like trauma survivors and then psychotherapists, physiotherapists, I want to create a space where they're all able to kind of like talk, right? And connect, and you're able to kind of fuel your unique response based on these people who understand what you're going through. So I want to have, especially I've got a few psychotherapists in mind who are great, as well as a few physiotherapists who I want to like set up chats with. And then I want to work in a community where I bring, I kind of end the stigma maybe around being scared to talk about your own traumatic circumstances, right? And create like an open and positive space where people can connect with others who are and who aren't struggling with. Like, some people I just know are going to be there to want to support these people and help them through. Like I said, there's a lot of good people out there, and some people have their own lived experiences who can connect with you as well. So that's kind of the overline of what I want to do, hit the ground running. There's, again, like everything I've talked about today, so much more that I'm sure we could talk about with it, but that's the biggest thing. And for anyone listening, at HTGR Canada is our TikTok and our Instagram. All the follows, likes, all that stuff is great support for us. It helps us secure sponsorships from major corporations and stuff, which fund us, right? Like, that's how we're going to be able to help all these people. So donate if you can. We always appreciate it, or just simply give us a like, follow on Instagram, whatever. It all helps us out at the end of the day. So
I've said it a million times on this podcast, but I'm always so thankful there are people like you who use these moments and then create something from it that like fills that hole or creates that space for people who really need it. Because so many times I'm on social media too much. I'm hyper online, and like people are always just waiting for the government to do things. And it's like, yes, we should be advocating and pushing government to create policy changes and all this stuff. But until we can, as we do that, we need people like you, like some other of my past guests who create it and go all in and work their ass off to help these people who really, really need it. So kudos to you. You have an event coming up. As we record this, we're in July. So if you're listening, anytime between now and September, it's coming up. You can register.
Yeah,
Tell me a little bit
we got
about that.
we got our virtual run coming September 19th to 26th. So we're going to allow people to run throughout the entire week. Basically, we're opening up a full marathon, half marathon, a 10K, a 5K, and then just kind of like a 1K like fun run. Like, you know, some of my buddies are going to get a case of beer and just walk a kilometer. I mean, it's just kind of an excuse to get out there, support a great cause, you know, and have some fun, right? I think what's really cool about it for me is that I've had so many people who otherwise would not have been running or doing this stuff who are like, you know what, I'm on board. And you know, a month later, they're telling me, they're like, I'm in the best shape of my life. I feel great. I'm active. I have an excuse to get outside, and someone's holding me accountable because I've got this run coming up in September. So yeah, if you're looking to support a great cause and have some fun doing it, definitely join up on our run. Our website's www.htgrcanada.com. Check it out. I think it's yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, this is great. Kudos for remaining positive and everything you've been through, and coming on here and sharing this story. Super important, and super, I think, validating for a lot of people as well. What are some of your social handles? Just so people are aware. I know I'm going to include in the bio of the episode, but just you said TikTok, Instagram.
Yeah, like I said, my personal is Peacock _ Brandon on Instagram. I don't have TikTok. All my TikTok is on HTGR Canada. So I'm barely learning how to use that platform, but I've got a good team around me who's helping me out. So yeah, at HTGR Canada is both our TikTok and our Instagram handle. Check us out there. We have Facebook and LinkedIn pages too, but honestly, like, I don't know, they're not very used. Yeah, like there's something we probably should use a little bit more, but you know, we don't. But yeah, like I said, give us a follow, give us some likes, you know, stay in touch with us on there if you want to support the cause in some way, because I know it often goes overlooked, but it's so important for us to grow that social platform, to secure sponsorship. And I know it's you know, it's something that it's a whole learning curve for me. I'm definitely not a huge social media guy per se, but I'm definitely trying to grow the brand through it. So if you could help us out, we really appreciate that always.
Beauty. Well, yeah, again, thank you. This was awesome, and I appreciate you coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it. It's good chatting with you.